Welcome to Whkyhac Day 2. We are slightly fresher than yesterday, a little more chipper. I, for one, am very excited for all of our technical talks today because this is my meat of the conference. And I also am the one who personally gently coerced many of the participants into talking today. But nonetheless, all of them are people who either have been here and talked at Whkyhac before and have some new material for you guys, or people who we have not seen in our little community before, and have brought some exciting projects to us to consume. So, yay.
We love that.
I think we should do a reminder. Pretty much all the talks, we will have a live Q&A after. So if you have questions during the talk, drop them during the talk. Don't drop them at the end of the talk because we can't always get to them if they're given too late. Earlier is better. Earlier almost guarantees question answering.
If you have even before the talk, just be like, this is for Spencer in an hour. That's fine. We'll get to it.
But yeah, just general reminder, Q&A happening pretty much all day. But yeah, it should be a good day. And we will be back soon with our first talk of the... Is it evening? It's middle of the... It's the middle of the... Okay.
It's middle of the day.
Okay, the middle of the day. That doesn't sound as good.
Time zones are just the weirdest things.
Okie dokie, see y'all soon.
Okay. Do I need to do anything? Oh, guess I'm live, eh? Hi, everyone. So, guess it's time for my talk. So, I'm everyone. I'm Josh Weisbach, and today I'm going to chat about modern talent identification in sports. A little bit of literature review, as well as some suggestions if you want to get involved within talent identification, especially within the context of women's hockey. So this, like I said, this talk here, just want to chat to you about the latest research and data-driven talent identification, as well as suggest some ways you can get involved with hockey. We're going to talk about current literature within the academic world. We're going to talk about fitness data, performance data, qualitative data, other data, mixed sources, and then we'll talk about some applications that you can run as an individual if you want to get involved in this domain. So quick introduction so you know who I am and why I have the qualifications to be talk about this. So again, my name is Josh. I'm employed as a communication electronic engineer as my day job. I have a Bachelor of Science in Computing Science back in Simon Fraser in 2010. And then in 2012 to 2014 here in Ottawa, Canada, I was working on my Master's of Science in Computing Science. And there I was specializing in machine learning, natural language processing, artificial intelligence. And my research and thesis work was really involved in hockey predictions, specifically single game predictions. And around that time, I was in the public research world, or I guess the hockey Twitter world at the time, from 2011 to 2015. I was writing and publishing on a number of different sites, Canucks Army, Hockey Graphs, NHL Numbers, and I even ran CHLstats.ca for a while. And those two realms really got me involved and picked up with one of my good friends, Cam Lawrence, into the NHL, where we've been working for the last decade for a couple different teams. In two real roles, both data engineering and talent identification. Talent identification work is actually the work that really got picked us up with our public blogging world. And more recently, 2023, I started my PhD at Carleton University here in Ottawa, Ontario, where I'm working on data-driven talent identification and both the application and the theoretical work. So from there, let's talk about what is talent identification. So talent identification is all about projecting which young athletes have the potential to succeed at a higher level of competition. The key here is focusing on long-term projections, typically 2 to 5 years out or throughout their entire career. We're not looking at this within the season or within the year or even the next season. That's just too short term. Instead, we're trying to aim to predict how they'll develop as they reach their prime, particularly in their peak years. Traditional sports science talent identification includes a comprehensive approach. We look at psychological data, fitness data, qualitative data, any kind of data we can get on the athletes. And we use that to try and, again, project and build a complete picture of what their athlete's potential is. So bring that to hockey. This process starts right around an athlete as a teenager, right around their draft years. We try and use the data that we have to project their development through their prime seasons. As we know through hockey analytics, it's around 23, 25 years out, or 23, 25 years old. But this problem isn't limited to just hockey. It is applicable to every single sport, whether it's NFL, NBA, or even non-professional sports, such as developing your Olympic team out 2 or 3 cycles. Of course, the challenge is to identify which of these young athletes will excel in the elite level during these key years. So when we talk about talent identification, we're really talking about the sophisticated blend of data analysis and expert judgment, all aiming at predicting which players will make the biggest impact as they mature into their careers. And I try and aim to do this with a data-driven approach using machine learning or other different algorithm-based techniques. So now that we've identified what talent identification is and how it's applied, especially in hockey, we can focus to the modern research within the literature and the academic world. We're going to explore the latest advancements in predictive models, how data science and machine learning leverage, and what these developments mean for the future of talent identification within the sport. The first bucket of research I look at is fitness data. This is probably the most popular area of research. It's using data such as physical fitness metrics such as speed, strength, agility, endurance, body composition metrics. These are often collected in some sort of standardized test, and they're often the basis for many models. While this is probably the most popular area, it's probably also the most simplest area, as we'll see here. Most of the research is covering between 2009 to 2023. It's covered in many different sports, NFL, NHL, CFL, soccer. They use a number of different approaches, such as discriminant function analysis, linear regressions, principal component analysis, correlation analysis. And they may even use more complex methods or models, such as composite physical fitness indexes or stepwise linear regressions. But really, the summary of all this work is that they typically just look at some sort of regression or some sort of correlation between fitness and future work. And it's pretty simple in its approach. The key finding from all these studies is that fitness data alone is a relatively weak predictor of long-term success. However, once you start combining it with other types of data, you start improving your overall projections toward athletic talent identification. The next bucket I look at is performance data. I'd say this is probably just as popular as the fitness data. So when we talk about performance data, we refer to the in-game results and statistics that are generated in competition, in-game, in sport. And in hockey, that would be things like the goals, assists, time on ice, passing accuracy, et cetera, that an individual athlete will actually generate in competition, in sport. Research covers a huge range of years, or a shorter range of years, 2015 to 2023, but also covers a much larger range of sports. So you have your traditional professional North American sports, NFL, and NBA, NHL, but you also start seeing the less traditional sports that we probably talk about in this world. So you see a lot of soccer, you see Olympic swimming at the national team level, you see a lot of cycling data trying to predict future athletes again. That's what it comes down to. And the approaches that they're using tend to be a bit more advanced than the fitness data, usually using things like support vector machines, artificial neural networks, random forests, ensembles, cohort-based approaches, and neural networks. So in hockey, for example, performance data has been critical in identifying which players are likely to succeed at the NHL level. Metrics like goals and assists are obvious indicators, but when you start combining with advanced stats like time on ice, passing accuracy, or other performance metrics, we can start building a much more accurate picture of a player's potential. Similar to the last one, the key takeaway from this by research is that performance data alone is powerful at projecting future athletic performance. Once you start combining it with other data, you're going to increase that success even more. Another bucket of data that we look at is qualitative data or scouting data. What's interesting is this data doesn't necessarily have to be just numerical. It can be both the text-based data that you'll see from scouting reports, or it can be in numbered scales where scouts or qualitative individuals can analyze an athlete on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. There's a little bit less research here. 2017 to 2024 covers NHL, MLB, soccer, and we're using, again, a bit more advanced or more modern approaches to data science, to AI, from natural language processing to extracting insights from scouting reports, use of large language models, machine learning techniques, gradient boosting, neural networks, etc. Again, you're looking at the same type of result. This area of research does provide good work at predicting future athletes' performance. It does even better when you combine it with others. And what I also find interesting is using scouting data. If you use scouting data with machine learning type models, you can do better at projecting an athlete's future performance than scouts can do themselves with their own data. The last single siloed bucket I would quickly mention is, I call it other data, but realistically, it's typically psychological data. There's not a lot of research in here, and that goes for many different reasons. I know in the NHL, every team does it differently. Every NHL team runs their own psychological methods. There's no standard across the industry. It's not shared. So, of course, there's not a lot of public research available on this. I know of only 2 studies that talk about hockey back in 2007 and 2010. They look at different psychological and cognitive testing, regression analysis, etc. And again, similar results. These do provide good results in terms of projecting athletic performance. I wouldn't be using this as my #1 go-to, but again, once you start combining this with the other buckets, you can do well in projecting future athletic performance. And then, of course, the final one I'll touch on is the mixed sources, what I call it. It's really when you use any 2 of the previous data sources that we just talked about. There's a lot of research in this field, covers a large range of years. We cover a large range of sports. We use a lot of the modern techniques, again, random forest, support vector machines, neural networks. etc. And again, this is where you can start really seeing the improvements in your projections for athletic performance once you start combining these different data sources. So that's a very quick run through at the highest level, just based on time, of the current academics state of talent identification, data-driven talent identification. We can see a variety of research showing a wide range of algorithms are being employed to project athletes, but there's still a significant gap, especially in hockey. And I'd also say I'm not aware of any women's hockey research, so there's a complete gap there. The other thing to mention is that a lot of this research is published research. So I'm aware that a lot of teams do their own internal research. Of course, that's not public, so I can't really comment on that. But so I'm sure there is a lot more state-of-the-art hidden within teams, but obviously the competitive advantage is going to be kept there. I'd also vice versa say, if you're aware of any research that I may not be aware of, please share with me, because I want to include it in my ultimate PhD thesis in the end. But now, with that high-level summary, we can start talking as hockey fans of ways to get yourself involved in some recommendations for myself of how you can get involved in talent identification within this growing field. So, as with any data science project, any analytics project, you need data. For myself, I'd recommend one of the best places to get started with data is probably the NCAA. Both the men and women's websites provide really detailed game data. They provide play-by-play data. They provide some on-ice data for different events. They provide all the scoring data. And you could use and build your own scraping tools to collect this data, aggregate it, and store it. And from there, you can build your own basic data source to start building projects on. So that's something that it does interest you. Feel free to reach out to me, and I can provide you some more specifics of how to get involved with that. And of course, once you have that data, now you can start using that data to start projecting talent identification. You can start running talent identification projects to project athletic performance. So whether it's trying to project athletes into the PWHL, into the legacy leagues, into the World Championships, or the Olympic performance, I would recommend, the NCAA source is a good source to start from. Of course, there's other ones too, but that's just one I'd recommend to start with. And really, if you're interested in this, once you have your data, you can start replicating some of these various projects. Whether you want to start building models or you want to start running some simple regressions, there are really easy ways to start building the women's hockey analytics, talent identification sphere using some of this data. Using this data you scrape, you can start by projecting future athletic performance using the different algorithms we talked about, such as regression analysis, support vector machines, random forest, bagging, boosting, neural networks. And you can use these models to help yourself project future outcomes in terms of gameplay of athletes, in terms of games played, team performance, or even specific offensive output metrics. Or if you really want to start with something simple, you can start running just basic correlations between their performance in one league into the next league. So again, if this is something you're interested in, please feel free to reach out. I can start pointing you in the right direction. I can give you some guidance or some ideas or suggestions or something to just help you started. And of course, if you're lucky, if you have some more challenging to get data, especially in the women's hockey world, I recommend you start looking at any of the projects where you can combine these data sources. Scouting data may be possible if you can pull them from blogs or websites like The Athletic, but I would doubt it'd be hard to get access to physical fitness metrics or scouting or psychological reports. But if you had them, there's some projects for you to get involved with. So again, very quick run through of what the state of the art in talent identification literature is. So just quickly wrapping up. Today we explored about talent identification within hockey. We discussed different data sources from performance metrics, scouting reports, fitness data, and psychological reports, and how these are used to predict athlete success. We talked about some research findings, highlighting the use of multiple data sources, enhancing accuracy and projections, and ultimately provide a more holistic view of player potential. So again, each data source is useful on their own. Combining them is the best way to start building talent identification models or running talent identification in application. Again, for those who are interested in getting involved, I encourage you to start by replicating some of these simple projects, start building collecting data, which is readily available, into a single source, and then trying to replicate some of the easier tasks that you get. Always remember there's a supportive community here to help you on the way. So again, don't hesitate to reach out if you need any questions, if you have any questions or just need some guidance or just point along the way. So I'll wrap that up here. Just stay within my time. I want to thank everyone for inviting me today. It's been a pleasure to quickly share that. Yeah, and if there's time for questions, I am open to questions.
Thanks, Josh. It's always a pleasure to have someone from not only the academic community, but the broader sports academic community to dip their toes into women's hockey. My first question, and Mike actually touched on this by popping this question in the chat, was you mentioned that the fitness and biometric data is only predictive when it's combined with other things. Why is that? Because you'd think that someone who is more naturally athletic, right, would be more successful or something like that.
Yeah, good question. So I'd say there's two things. I would say that I may have misspoke. Fitness data is not predictive.
Sure.
It's just not the best source on its own.
Okay.
And my hypotheses for that, I think performance metrics are probably the better way to go. Just because hockey itself is not a sport that is as dependent on physical fitness to play. It's more skill-based.
Right. Yeah.
And probably mental-based. So I would say you don't have to be the fittest player, you don't have to be the strongest player, you don't have the best aerobic fitness to be the best player on the ice who can read the game and score.
Right.
So that would be my hypotheses toward that.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I look forward to reading, see if you elaborate on that in your thesis. Let's see what Jeremy says. We have another question from the chat. Is there any difference when looking at these models when it comes to goalies versus skaters because of different physical demand / data available, or is it all the same?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's going to be the default answer is the one you'll hear 90% of the time in the community, right? Goalies are voodoo. Yeah. Almost every single research I'm aware of is solely focused on skaters, right? So I don't think NHL or hockey related papers I've seen, I'd have to double check, have a goalie focus. So I mean that would be a simple project to run. I think back in Canucks Army, and you can probably Google it, but it's probably still available. We started looking at some basic goalie talent identification problems. And it was the same hypotheses. The best goalies usually, but not are always, the ones who succeed. So I don't think that answers a specific question. That touches a little bit more on my gut feeling in it. Yeah.
Interesting. Jeremy also has another question. How accurate is the predictive modeling with all of the metrics combined? All of these different categories, I guess you would say. What's the error margin for that, and how does it differentiate between sports to a wide degree?
Hard one. So I'll keep to the hockey side. Again, I can point to the papers if you want to start reading the specifics on the metrics. If you go to hockey, you look at the NHL and the draft, I think something like an average draft pick is about 1 in 5. 1 in 5 draft picks actually make the NHL. It's something like that. I don't think it's that high. Your modeling might get it up to 30%. There's still a huge bust rate in terms of success in hockey. And then you're going to see that in a lot of other sports.
Right.
And it really just comes down to there's only so many positions that the athletes are fighting for or competing for. So the best of the many are the ones who will rise. So I think it's as much it's difficult. It's a very challenging space. There's nothing.
I mean,
you're looking at very low percentages is the ultimate answer.
Yeah.
I mean, the baseline itself is just so low. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Just a bunch of questions came in. Mike also. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to be biased and ask Ben's. obviously player evaluation requires sample sizes and enough data/film to have confident opinions. But what are some of the things that can stand out very, very quickly in a player's profile?
To me, it's the rule of thumb that a player who is the best at performing at a lower level will stand out to be the ones who typically rise to the next level. And we've seen that every single year in the last decade plus since I've been involved. There's always debates in the public sphere of who's a good player, who's not a good player, the scouts versus the data arguments that we see every year. And more often than not, when it's those players who truly are like best of their league, best in decades, tend to succeed despite the qualitative arguments against it. So again, the answer would be to me is the thing that stands out is when a player is performing at the best level as they can. Your elite athletes become elite athletes.
Yeah, I mean, that's true enough.
Yeah.
I, unfortunately, Mike and Jeremy, I'm going to not ask your questions in favor of my own that I'm actually kind of dying to ask. So women's hockey, as you mentioned, doesn't have a lot of data types of these kinds. Like the fitness data is limited there. The qualitative data is limited. The performance data is obviously there, right? Like as inherent to sports. But what would you recommend that teams focus on collecting first with their limited resources outside of the performance data?
Outside of performance data?
Yeah.
I would still trust the role of scouts. I was going to answer a slightly different question. Yeah. Like if you're trying to build a team and you have the performance data to identify talent, the next source I would use is scouting data. There's still truth in the fact that scouts see things that data doesn't see, and the best athletes are ones where both the data and the scouts agree on, right? I mean, it goes back to the summary of all the models, right? When you have multiple sources, and that's what I found in experience over the last decade plus. Mm-hmm. So if you have your performance models telling you that player X is really good and the scouts agree, that's the one to trust. If there's a disagreement, then it's worth having that debate of why is there a disagreement, and then validating it that if the scouts are going to be right or if the data is finding an outlier. Yeah. So
I like that answer a lot, actually. I appreciate that. Thanks, Josh. So we are already running behind a little bit. So we're going to wrap this up here. Thank you so much, Josh, for coming on. And we hope to see you around the community and on Twitter.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like I said, if there's any questions I missed, just reach out at one of these contacts.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to my 2024 Whkyhac presentation, Deciphering Goalie Stats. I am the disembodied voice of Jeremy from Giants in the Crease, and we're going to try and get through this presentation in 10 minutes, and I'm not going to tell you how many takes it has taken to get this right. So we need to get through this, so let's just hop right into this. So first off, let's take a look at the stats we have available to evaluate goalies with, right? We got our save percentage, we have our goals saved above expected, and we have our goals saved above average. So all three, well, save percentage and GSAA are used mostly in the women's game because we don't really have public goals saved above expected models out there in public yet. Hopefully soon, but until then, we kind of have what we have. And then, of course, we also have some of my other favorite goalie stats. We have quality start percentage and expected win percentage, which is something I helped create back in 2022 at my first ever Whkyhac Analytics conference. So those are kind of the main stats that we use to evaluate goalies. And you can see the charts right in front of you here, talking about goalie performance and whatnot. So with all those stats available, what else do we really need to do to evaluate goalies? That sounds about it, right? There we go. Presentation done. Took about 2 minutes. Well under the 10-minute mark, thankfully. There we go. It's that easy to evaluate goalies, right? I wish. Because then it'd be a lot easier to explain how CJ went from Buffalo to Toronto and saw an increase in their statistics. Because goalies are allowed to get better in the offseason, but to see that kind of jump in stats, there's more going on there than CJ really putting in some hard training and everything clicking. I mean, the easiest thing to look at might be, well, CJ saw a decrease in starts. Did that play a factor into it? Not really. As you can tell by these two charts here, the more starts a goalie gets, the less variance there is in their stats. So the fact that CJ took a step back in her stats means that there's more variance added in, and they easily could end up with a lot worse numbers, but they didn't. So where's the truth? Will the real CJ please stand up? Because we have seen two different CJs and not quite sure exactly what kind of goalie they are. So that's what we're going to try and figure out here is, why do these changes happen? And why CJ stats changed the way that they did. If you were to ask Qui-Gon Jinn, he'd tell you that it's symbiosis, which means that everything in hockey on the ice, every part of a team working together for mutual advantage, which, it's pretty typical hockey stuff, right? Yeah, if your offense, your defense, your goaltending, all of that works well together, you're winning a lot of games. Some of that doesn't show up, you're losing games. Simple concept? Yes. But there's more to it. And before we get to it, though, want to lay a foundation first of the three league stats that we're going to be using for this. We have the SDHL, the PHF, and the PWHL. All different leagues bring something else to the table in terms of evaluating goalies, especially the SDHL, which looks like it might be turning into a bit of a development league or pipeline for goalies who can't make the PWHL but still want to play somewhere. There's the SDHL. draft of the NCAA. So first of all, looking kind of at the only defensive statistic we have, which is shots against per 60. Now on the PHF, we got some smiley faces here, which shows that for the most part we have parity, which is why we have these goalies all kind of clumped up in the middle there. And then on the other sides, we have teams that are allowing very few shots, but teams are also allowing a lot of shots. And what that's happening is it's helping to, for lack of a better word, inflate goalie stats, because either you're playing on a really good team or you're playing on a team that's allowing everything, but allowing everything also means allowing a lot of low danger shots. And then the SDHL, we have a very clear line of, if you're on a good team, you're putting up good stats. If you're on a bad team, you're probably putting up bad stats. And in the PWHL, we're seeing something a little bit different, the opposite of the PHF. Got a frowny face instead of a smiley face here. So here we have, kind of the same thing happen. Because of the strong parity in the league, we're seeing the trend line go up. So the more shots a goalie sees, the better their numbers get. And then at a certain point, though, in those stats, we are seeing a decline, because those teams, if they're allowing more shots in a tight parity like this, league like this, it means more than likely that those teams are allowing more quality shots against, which is leading to more goals and worse stats. So the next thing we want to figure out is, what has a greater effect on winning? Goals or saves? And right out of the gate, goals are making quite the big argument there, as it's just pretty much a straight line up. Score a lot of goals, you win a lot of games. Pretty simple. And then when it comes to making saves, kind of the same thing there. We're seeing a steady line up, although not as steady as the goals for. And then it's the same thing with the SDHL. A steady line up, but then we are seeing the team effects here play more of a role, where once you reach a certain points percentage, the goalie effect goes away and the goal effect takes over. And then in the PWHL, here's where the parity comes into play, where if you're putting up good numbers, your team is winning a lot. But are they winning a lot because you're putting up good numbers, or because you're scoring a lot of goals? That's a lot harder to figure out there. Because once again, if you take out the outlier of Abby Levy on both of these, then you're getting more of a straight line up for quality start percentage, though on goals saved above average, you are getting a pretty big clump. And then the difference here is going to be goals. So, can a team affect their goaltending stats through scoring a lot of goals? Because goals are so important, how much are they affecting goaltending? Well, in the SCHL, they help out a lot until you get to one of those top three offenses, in which case you're kind of getting diminishing returns there from the goaltending. But before that, though, you need your team to score, or else your goalie is going to have a harder time putting up good stats. And then the PHF, we're seeing that goals don't really play that big of a factor unless you're scoring a lot or you're scoring a little bit, in which case that's kind of team effects, and then everyone else is kind of crunched in the middle. And then with the PWHL, once again, we're seeing that same thing. Well, goals are being scored, goalie's making a lot of saves. Those are kind of going up at the same rate. What does that mean? To me, it means these teams are so good and everything is so, the parity is so tight that it all just helps each other out. If you're on a good team, you're scoring goals, and your goalie's making saves because good defense is happening, and it all just results in everything looking good at the same time. And I also wanted to show how that team effect is happening here as well. So, once again, in the SDHL, your best teams are really freaking good. They're scoring a lot of goals, suppressing a lot of shots. PHF, we're seeing a little bit more of that parity. Yeah, we got some elite teams. Yeah, we got some not so elite teams, but generally a big clump in the middle. And then in the PWHL, with more historical data, this would look better. But if we took out Erica Howe, yeah, we're seeing kind of that same level of parity there where it's almost going to be close to a straight line across. Because these teams are, once again, so close to each other, it's hard to differentiate. So, with all that in mind, what have we learned? Well, in the SDHL, team effects are extremely real, and you have to factor in what team a goalie is playing for in terms of how they look statistically. So, it actually makes it a little bit easier to find out which goalies are having exemplary seasons because the outliers are going to be very obvious, especially with the amount of historical data available for the SDHL. And the PHF, we're seeing less team effects there, which makes it a little bit more difficult to figure out which goalies are being are the best, but also helping in that way too. So team effects are happening, also not happening. It makes it a little bit harder to differentiate, but the outliers do stick out, thankfully, with the amount of data we have. And then the PWHL, man, is it hard to figure out who the outliers are right now. It's hard to figure out who's having an exemplary season. That's why when it came to goalie of the year, I didn't really have a strong opinion on it. There's just so many good goalies. It really just depends on how you want to look at things. All right, so we've got to the end of this, and we'll see if this can get edited down to 10 minutes, but otherwise we didn't go too far over. Not the 30 minutes that one take was. So get the quick thank yous. Thank you to Carly, Alyssa, and Mike for bringing me back. Thank you to everyone for watching this. Thank you to my wife and daughter who are very supportive in the work I do and very understanding that I need to sometimes take time away to do this stuff. And I don't know legally how much I'm allowed to talk about the work I've done, but to the PWHL team out there that brought me on this past season, thank you very much for the opportunity. Looking forward to people's questions at the Q&A.
Hello, everyone. We are here with Jeremy, who just gave our wonderful talk, and also Calliope, who is a regular guest on Whkyhac, to much of everyone's delight, because she is the cutest women's hockey analytics child. So hopefully Calliope can answer our questions. And let's start off with Mike's first question. What kind of sample size do we need to measure performance in the PWHL? As he says, it does seem very hard to judge goalies on 3 starts.
In season, it would be good to... Okay, are you going down? Bye-bye.
Bye!
In season, I would say having seasons like the SDHL has, where it's in the low, mid to 30 games played range, at least allow goalies, if they're doing like a 1-3 or a 1/3 split or whatever, to get like, one goalie gets 20 games, one goalie gets 10 games. 10 games is a little bit easier to get something from than like 3 games, right? So with the PWHL moving their games up to, in the 30s this year, that'll be good. And then if we can get it up even a little bit higher, the more sample size, the better, really.
Yeah, honestly. Spencer asks, So is Elaine truly just a model breaking goddess? I would agree yes, but what's your opinion?
Apparently so. I
Uh,
said from the very start how much I liked Debian, followed by Julie, followed by Wasano as
mhm,
their 1-2-3 tandem, just because of how they don't play exactly the same, but they play close enough that you don't have to worry about your defense needing to adjust to what goalie's behind them. Just generally play the same way, and it worked out really well for them, obviously.
right. Yeah, well, clearly. Ben asks, what kind of adjustments or stats can we make to adjust stats by volume? Actually, that does kind of make sense. What kind of adjustments or stats can we make to adjust stats by volume, and what's more valuable across maybe 1 goal allowed over 40 minutes versus 3 goals over 60 minutes? Do you understand that?
Okay. I kind of okay. I think I see what he's getting at,
And
and so
if you can clarify in the chat, please do.
so he's trying to figure out, what's the better rate stats. That's why I've moved away from like the per 60 stuff and moved to like shots, because time based it's difficult. Every goal is going to see something a little bit different, and I found that the more shots a goalie sees per 60, the harder it is to differentiate how those goalies are playing, because the goalies who are seeing so many shots, they just break the models even more, breaks the charts even more. So keeping it at per 30 shots at least gives us a chance to compare better across all the goalies. And then if you want to see kind of the defensive environments, that's when you bring in the shots against per 60 to see what they're facing in front of them.
Right. Okay. Well,
I hope that answers your question, Ben.
As always, if you have questions or clarifications to questions, pop them in the chat. And for those of you on the whkyhac.com page, the link to the chat is right below the video. So some more questions of my own. You kind of got around this answer in your presentation. Maybe I missed it, but in the current day of the SDHL and PWHL, if you had to tell teams, which do you focus on more, saves or goals? Which one are you going to choose?
I think I talked about this last year as well, but get yourself some goals. I think this year, especially in the PWHL, proved that you can find somebody who can stop a puck pretty much up and down the lineup, but to find someone who can score, to find goals, that's hard. And that's not even going into what happened in the playoffs, where goals became even more rare. So
Right, yeah.
if I'm a team, I want goals. I know I'm probably going to be able to get saves, but goals, those are hard to come by. And as we saw in the charts, goals just have a lot larger and more predictable impact on team success than goalie play does, at least with the current stats that we have.
So the answer is to find a goalie who can score for you.
That works too. That's why Toronto kept CJ around, right?
Right? Yeah. Mike has asked another question. You're a goalie coach. How do you split goalie starts in the PWHL season?
Ooh. So if we're just going into season 2 of the PWHL, what I would do there is, every goalie situation is kind of the same in terms of, who your number 1 is, who your number 2 is, who your number 3 is, in terms of the level of talent between them. They're all so close. This kind of applies for every team, but you're probably looking to get your starter in about, close to 20-ish games, maybe 18, 17. And then you want to have your number 2 getting about 9 to 10 starts, and then your number 3 getting maybe like 2 to 3 starts, just to keep them fresh. Having that game time is important, and you never know when you might need them. So just having them, used to playing games again will go a long way. I understand this year it was a lot harder to do. You got 24 games. Some teams maybe played their starters a bit much. I don't think it really made much of an impact just because of how spread out all the games were. But I can see why it was a lot harder for teams to split up the starts. But now that we're going into this new season, there's more starts available. I think you can keep your goalies fresher by giving your number ones a little bit less. That also helps give the other goalies a little bit more game time. So if anything should happen to the number one, you have somebody ready to go, and you're not worried about them being super rusty.
Very thorough. My follow-up question to that is, like, I can't remember off the top of my head how many PWHL back-to-backs we saw this year, but is that distribution affected like by back-to-backs? I feel like you did some kind of research at some point, like how back-to-backs affect goalie performance in women's hockey, but I can't remember.
I probably talked about it. Probably haven't done actual like physical research on it.
Well, based on vibes.
I probably talked about it. So I think the goalies are kind of more used to it, right? Because in the NCAA, that's where most of these goalies, if not all of them, are coming from. You're playing back-to-backs, or even if you're coming from the SDHL, you're doing back-to-backs. They're weekend leagues. So the goalies are used to it. If you want to use them back-to-back, they're used to it. They're also used to it because they've played in the World Championships. It's a tight tournament. It's just game. These goalies, compared to NHL ones, are a lot more used to games in a short period of time. But if I don't know how the schedule's going to look for this year, nobody does except for the people making it. So that's going to depend on how the schedule looks and how teams may want to play it out. Because we saw that Minnesota, they won with a goalie who played fewer games than most of the other number ones in the league. So maybe there's something to resting and giving the other goalie a chance.
Yeah, who knows? Well, I look forward to hearing that in your talk next year. Going way back to like the CWHL, you mentioned in the beginning kind of the distribution of goalie talent in each league, and like team talent in each league. Like the SPHL being very top heavy, and then like the PHF having pretty strong parity. What was the CWHL like? Because I know you've looked at that in the past. From my recollection, it was also pretty even parity, given like the player demographic was pretty similar to the like PWHL just 10 years ago.
I would say the closest comparison, which is why I went with the CWHL goal numbers, is the PHF, because in the CWHL you usually have one, maybe two teams that were just head and shoulders above the rest, right? Whether it was Montreal or Boston pre-2015, those were teams that would just run over everybody. And then you'd have pre-2012 you'd have your Burlington Barracudas, which maybe won 4 games a year if they were lucky. And then once those teams folded up, you kind of saw a little bit more parity, and then of course the PHF starts, the Boston American players go away, and then the Blades are just at the bottom of the league forever. And the PHF usually had one team that was kind of hugging the bottom of the floor, and one team that was on top. But so that's why that would be about. They're similar. That would be the comparison I would make.
Oh, thank you. I also just noticed your shirt. I have to say that is adorable.
Oh, thank you.
I love that.
Wife
so
got
much.
it for me.
That's so cute. Well, thank you for wearing it on the stream, and thank you for talking goalies, and also showing a fan favorite Whkyhac on the stream.
Oh, thank you all for having me here. It's always an honor to be brought into a place with such smart minds, from the 3 of you running it to everybody that you invite here. It's always a pleasure to be brought here and be surrounded by such smart people, and I think I learn more than I teach here, so that's good for me.
Well, I disagree, because I learn so much about goalies every year, every year. Okay, thank you so much, Jeremy.
Welcome to Measuring Rebound Control in the PWHL's 2024 season. My name is Jules Dion, and I am a software architect and systems analyst. And since 2014, I've been working as a developer, consultant, and researcher for hockey teams and leagues at all levels of play, both here and in Europe. For the past 4 or 5 years, however, I've become increasingly focused on real-time systems, and I've been leading the design and development of software which provides real-time analysis and in-game decision support, and which I've been calling Stats on Tap. Last year, as a personal project, I decided to use Stats on Tap to track all the games of the PWHL's 2024 season. I reached out to Mike to see if the Ice Garden might be interested in publishing the results and the various reports that came out of that data set. He was, and those are all now available online. I'm not sure if there's a link from the Ice Garden website to the Google Sheet that contains the data I contributed and much more, but certainly if you dropped either Mike or me an email, we'd be more than happy to send you the link. So a few weeks ago, Carly reached out and asked if I'd be interested in doing a quick talk about the process I used to generate the data, and of course I said I'd be happy to. So today we'll take a quick look at the input surface of the tracking software I used, and we'll do a speed run look at rebound control using the data. That will encompass the core Stats on Tap dataset I created, some supplemental data that I got from the PWHL. We'll look at the ad hoc definition I created for rebound control that we'll use, and then the creation of the data used in this study. And then of course we'll be looking at the results. There are 2 data sources we'll be looking at today. The first one is the real-time data tracking using Stats on Tap. Stats on Tap has 2 modes, a multi-person mode or a single-person mode, and obviously with more people and more devices you can track more and more data. This was done in single-person mode, which gives us synchronized game clock events, all the shot attempts, plus the outcomes of those shots, zone transitions, stoppages and the reason for those stoppage, as well as game sheets events, such as goals or penalties. This is the control surface of Stats on Tap on an iPad in single device tracking mode. And I wanted to first give a quick overview of what we're seeing here. I'll also point out quickly that this is the exact configuration that I used when I was tracking the PWHL games last year. So in the middle of the left-hand part of the screen is a panel where I can tap to start the clock, tap to stop the clock. Once the period is underway, it will also surface some controls that allow me to keep my version of the clock in sync with the arena's version of the clock. In the lower right rather, is a panel where I can swipe left and right to indicate the puck entering or exiting a zone. In the main panel in the upper right is where I indicate the shot origins. Right now it's giving me the opportunity to change the orientation of where I'm sitting relative to the ice. However, once the period is underway, that goes away and I can enter shot origins. As shots are entered, they appear in a list in the shot outcomes area in the middle bottom. And that's where, as the shots appear, I can enter whether they were on net, or they missed, or they were blocked, or what have you. One play stops. In the lower left, I can indicate the reason for the stoppage. There are a number of buttons, and there's a more button with all sorts of different reasons. And last but not least, I'll point out the game sheet button in the upper left, and I can use that to enter goals and penalties. So let's just make up a couple of sequences of play here. I will start the clock by tapping and then swipe to indicate that the puck has entered one end zone. I can indicate a shot taking place. I'll say that it was blocked, and then maybe another shot. Say that one was on net. I'll say the puck left the zone, the puck enters the far zone, there's another shot from out here, and then I'll stop the clock. Everything is time-stamped exactly at the moment that I enter it. So for instance, the shot is entered, the timestamp is applied, and now I can, after the fact, enter what the shot outcome was. And I'll say that it missed the net, and in fact, I'll use the reason for stoppage. I'll say that the puck went out of play. Let's further just say, we'll stack stuff on here. We'll also say that there was a penalty applied, a penalty, say a Toronto penalty for 2 minutes, and I'll add it to the game sheet. And now we see that there's a Toronto 2-minute penalty. I'll put the play back in the Toronto end. The engine inside knows about the various rule sets. In this case, it's been told about that we're playing under PWHL rules. So we'll use that as an opportunity to simulate a jailbreak goal. We'll start the clock, move the puck into the neutral zone, into the Boston end. I'll take a shot from here, say it was on net. I'll stop the clock, and then I'll go under the game sheet and mark a Toronto goal. And so 3 things will happen. Toronto now leads 1-0. The penalty has gone away, and we're back in the neutral zone. So that is a very quick tour of the single device tracking mode. So all of the track data ends up in journal form, with a timestamp journal for each of the individual events. So there'd be a game clock journal, there'd be a zone transition journal, there'd be a shot attempt journal, and so on. The more trackers you have, the more journals you end up with. When it comes time to do the analysis, those journals are synthesized into what I refer to as a narrative form, which captures both the events as well as a rich context that surrounds each one. So as noted, we'll be using the regular season games for the study, and we'll be supplementing the real-time data with information from the PWHL data feed, specifically when goalies entered and exited play, and that allows us to link up the shot attempts with who was in net at the time it took place. So this is a table that results 7,800 or so shots. We have data about the shots, as well as data about the next event that follows the shot, whether it was another shot, a stoppage, or it was a zone transition. This is how those 7,800 shots break down in terms of outcome. The one that we're going to be focusing on are the ones where the save was made by the goaltender. And specifically what we'd like to do is evolve some sort of definition of those saves, which we are going to count as controlled and which we're going to count as uncontrolled. This is the decision tree that I rather arbitrarily put together for this purpose. And it just walks through. I won't be going through in detail, but for instance, if the next event after the shot attempt that we're looking at is another shot attempt, then we consider that first shot attempt to be an uncontrolled rebound. If it's a stoppage, if it happens within 5 seconds, it's controlled, otherwise not, and so on. This is the same table as we just saw, but with a couple of extra rows, breaking the saves into controlled versus uncontrolled. And we see that about 40, given our, again, ad hoc definition here, 48% of them are considered controlled and 52% are considered uncontrolled. Breaking the numbers down by goalie, this table shows all the goalies who played in the league, ordered by their controlled rebound percentage, and the league average, again, 48.02. I have highlighted in green the 8 goaltenders who played 480 minutes or more, which is the number the league uses as a cutoff. And without diving too deeply into this table, I will say that my preference for goalie stats is to measure only the 5v5. And as special teams, obviously, it's harder to isolate the goaltender contributions. So here's the same table at 5v5. There are 3 goalies with controlled rebound percentages of over 50%, Desbiens, Mashmeyer, and Frankel, with Desbiens with a notable 54 to the second place 51. The league average has gone from 48% to 48.5%. I've also included a save column at 5v5 for those who, like me, wish that save percentage was always at 5v5. I will note that the league average of all goaltenders was an absolutely remarkable 930 at 5v5. Switching to the PK, there are a few notable things. First, as expected, the controlled rebound percentage has fallen from 48.5 at 5v5 to 46 on the penalty kill. The save percentage has fallen from 930 to 888, but also notable are the 3 goalies who appear at the top of the list: Schroeder, Campbell, and Truly. All 3 goalies at 5v5 had controlled rebound percentages of in the neighborhood of 45, but here on the PK, rather than going down, they've skyrocketed to all being in the neighborhood of 54%. Now, the reason for this would be interesting to explore, but looking at the clock, I'm nearly out of time, so I'll leave it to say that if anybody has any ideas about this, get in touch. I'd love to exchange theories about what might be going on here. And as a final observation, I thought I would spin things around and look at it from the point of view of the shooting team and their uncontrolled rebound percentage. And what jumped out at me looking at this was how remarkably similar the ordering of the teams here are to the ordering of the teams in the final standing. And I don't know that if uncontrolled rebound percentage has any predictive value or if this is merely coincidence, but I thought it interesting enough that I would use it as my last slide. I want to thank you for coming along on this brief journey. We saw how the data sets were constructed using stats on tap for real-time data and supplemented with PWHL feed data for which goaltenders were in net for each shot. There was also an ad hoc definition given of rebound control that was crafted specifically to make use of that data. And finally, we used that definition to generate results for the league's controlled rebound percentage as a whole, as well as by goalie for 5v5 and shorthanded, and then finally by each team's uncontrolled rebound percentage. Here is my contact information. If you'd like to get hold of me, if you have any questions or would like more information about the real-time tracking system, I encourage you to do so. I thank you very much for your time and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your conference. Bye now.
Okay, hi everyone. I am here with Gilles, who we just heard talk. For everyone's reference, Gilles and I are speaking a little earlier than when this will be played. He unfortunately cannot be here at the conference live to take Q&A questions. So instead, I'm going to be bombarding him with all the questions I have. So first off, I'm not starting with a question. I'm going to start with a compliment. I love any piece of software that's custom designed for hockey applications, and particularly play-by-play tracking and everything of that sort, because, you know, as someone who did a lot of that stuff in my early days, the smoother an experience is, the better it is, right? And I just want to say how much I love how user-friendly the whole thing looks. And
thank you.
In particular, the whole zone swiping capability, I had never thought of ever doing something like that. And I think that in particular is a really, really great little little sparkle on the whole thing. So
the intent of it is that the focus of the tracker remains on the ice. And so there's a lot of thought and work and feedback that I've received and sort of just iterations on finding ways to focus primarily on the ice and not have to be looking down all the time to the tablet. Sometimes you have to, if there's a shot, the challenge I have is when a shot, you have to look down at some point to tap, but it's usually a moment where a lot is happening. So you can miss a follow-up shot. So there's a tension between looking down and entering what you've seen and keeping your eyes. So, but a lot of the effort is exactly on sort of having it as natural and as simple to do. Also for some teams at the lower levels, they're usually they don't have professional trackers for the team.
Right, yeah.
So they'll often be getting either players who are not on the game roster, or parents, or whoever. So it's somebody that the goal is that for the simplest state, you just hand the iPad to somebody, and in 30 seconds you can say, oh, this is how it works, and they're good to go.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love it.
So thank you.
To touch on, what we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, about pulling some inspiration from other fields, maybe, and you just mentioned, in taking user review, essentially.
Yep.
I wanted to ask, what parts of your background, you mentioned you were a software developer, and other experiences you've had with stuff like this, and maybe stuff not like this, that really informed the overall design process?
I love that question because it's really important to me where it came from. So I worked for a company called Algorithmics, which was later acquired by IBM. We worked in financial risk analytics, collateral, sort of derivative collateralization specifically. And I was very lucky that I had access to a QX team, like a sort of a user experience, a UX team, I'm sorry, of sort of user experience. And they were absolutely wonderful to work with. And I learned so much of sort of approaching it. And so going through a lot of tests with software that I wrote for IBM, going through the process of putting it in front of a user and working out and understanding the experience that they were going through and how they were using it and interacting with it, what came quickly and naturally. And so sort of the output of that to me was really learning how to approach software from the point of view of the user, and then sort of have that in one silo, what you want to do, what you want to have the software accomplish in another, and how technically that's going to work, all sort of informing each other, but not starting out with one of the other components and then putting that onto the user and saying, how do you deal with it? But rather starting at the user's perspective and say, okay, if you wanted to accomplish this goal, how would you interact with this? And actually, so, the question also relates to last year with the PWHL. One of my motivations, and it was a little down the list, but it was definitely on the list, was called dog fooding, right? Of sort of using your own software and as a user. And so last year was not the first time that I'd used it sort of in earnest, but going through, like every time I do tracking as a tracker, you learn something. And sometimes it's like just watching and sort of having an idea of perhaps some analysis that could be done of sort of like, oh, this is an interesting thing that happened in game. And I'll make myself a little note of sort of like, how many times does this happen? And could we measure it? And how would we quantify that? And how could we surface this just as the numbers like 6? And so just thinking of it from the point of view of the user, it's easiest to do if you're actually using it yourself.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, that's how I approach a lot of my own analysis and analytics of coming from the question of how is the user going to take this? How are they going to take this piece of information, or a software in this case, and go out in the world and use it?
Right. And so, but the learning, or where it became vivid or crystallized for me was with the UX team. And so I'm very appreciative of the folks. They were wonderful to work with. So it was a pleasure to always go back. It was sort of, so learned a lot.
That's really cool. For me personally, and maybe like some of the more technical audience members who are to be watching this, is the Stats on Tap thing completely built like from scratch, like is it? Oh wow, okay. What's it built in?
So it's about 300,000 lines of code.
Oh wow.
Written mostly, pretty much exclusively in C#.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Microsoft.NET. Up there you have technology. It used to be called Xamarin. It's now called .NET for iOS, where you can sort of write software in the .NET ecosystem and have the software. Now there's Windows applications, there's Azure like backend server software. There's a lot of additional stuff. So, but yes, all in .NET.
that as someone who is an avid Python user, that is very impressive to me. So kudos.
Well, I don't know, it's a whole, that's a different interview. I'm happy, I'm very happy Microsoft Stack user top to bottom, except for the actual delivery for tracking.
Okay.
The tracking side is all iOS devices.
Right. Yes.
And I do say devices, you can have multiple ones. And so if you are tracking multiple things, they communicate wirelessly with each other. And so the primary device receives incoming information from the secondary devices, and then it's journaled all on the primary device. So you'd have 2 or 3 or 4 people sitting side by side, all tracking different things. So when one person stops the clock, it stops the clock on everybody's. And so they're also sort of sending state back and forth. So as things happen, you're just looking at a live version of your little universe within the tracking system.
Right. That sounds very complicated to make. Just wanted to touch on the rebound control stuff, and I wish we had more time to talk about that because that was a really surprising result for me. Looking at the uncontrolled versus controlled rebounds, but because I would think that would be not as 50-50 as it was.
Yeah, that was certainly one of the well, I went in without knowing what it was. One of the things I do like to do with these kind of like just exploration, following my nose kind of presentations is literally that. It's sort of like I don't know what I'm going to find, and sort of just to document in roughly chronological order what I did, what I found, what that led me to. And for this, so that decision tree, that flow chart was made, and then that was it. So I did later go back and say, well, what if these 5 seconds were 7 seconds? How sensitive are they to the choices that I made? The answer is not very. Obviously all of this was done without knowing that, oh, this is what this goaltender resulted in, or that it's sort of like once that die was cast, improvements could probably be made, but that would be a different process, right?
The bones are there though.
The bones are there, but it's sort of the documentation of my weekend of just having a little excursion through the data.
Yeah, I love that excursion through the data. I'm going to describe my stuff as that more. On that topic of like excursioning through the data, you mentioned that I believe it was Schroeder and that little group of 3 that
Campbell
popped up to the top.
Campbell and Truly,
yes. That was a very interesting touch point. And I'm glad you talked about that. But what surprised me actually a little more was how much Maschmeyer and Frankel dropped.
Well, so this is the thing. So I mentioned it earlier, and I do believe that 5v5 is a natural state for measuring goalie performance.
Right. Yeah.
For the PK, the fact that they all go down, it is not surprising. First of all, obviously the play is all in your end. You're 1 player short. Your goaltender numbers are going to go down.
Right.
But also, if the system of the PK in front of you is as much of a contributor to what the quality of the shots are, how many go in, what you can do with those shots as a goaltender, as anything else. So I think any goaltender sliding, like the 2 Minnesota goalies went way down. I think that speaks more to the Minnesota system than to the 2 goalies. So looking at any individual ones, so Maschmeyer, she had the one that her save percentage basically doesn't move, but her rebound controls go way down.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And Frankel, I think it was Frankel. I don't recall exactly. Her her rebound stays the same, but the rebounds, her rebound control goes way down. Her save percentage.
Yes.
No, I got it back. The rebound control stays the same. Her save percentage goes down. My apologies. But all of those things, again, sort of any kind of that movement, I think speaks more to, or not more, but it speaks as much as a team effect as it is a goalie effect. Those I pointed out just because this I think was a goal. Like this was signal in that all that noise. in
Right.
that these goalies, the numbers, their save percentage doesn't move, which I think is perhaps just coincidence, just luck. But I think that the fact that their rebound control goes skyrocketing is a real thing. I don't know why. I could guess. I had a guess. I don't know if I did. I don't think I mentioned it in the talk.
Would you like to mention it now?
Well, for whatever it's worth, my guess would be that their style of play at 5v5 is much more willingness to keep the puck in play. And because of the specifics of the definition that I'm using, that perhaps just that definition is not being kind to them in terms of, how well the puck is managed after they've kept it in play. But in the PK, their mental approach to things changes, and they be like, now anything that comes near me, I want to stop. I want to stop playing if I can. And it's not something that jumped out at me watching the games. But I do believe it's that the numbers are so pronounced that I believe it's signal in the noise.
Right.
And if there were people who, any of those three goalie coaches who wanted to reach out, I would love to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, open invitation.
Or anybody else, actually, anybody else who wanted to sort of, but those are the three people though that could probably provide additional insight into the way that their goalies approach 5v5, different from shorthanded play.
Well, if you get at that answer, make sure you slide it over to me too, because I'm really curious. But thank you so much for talking about this.
My pleasure.
Really enjoyed having not only your little beautiful little demo that you did with that, but also the little analysis or meander through the analysis woods. I look forward to more or crunching that little piece of data a little more in the future.
Well, thank you for inviting me and sort of prompting me to do that analysis, because it wouldn't have happened without your question.
Always.
Or your
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Not Gilles.
It's like a ZH. You can take if I don't know if you're going to be editing it, but Gilles is fine.
I said it right.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks, Carly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Spencer Facetta. I am coming to you live from my fabulous new office at St. Michael's College. I completed a project over the last year plus looking at the differences in transitional play between men's and women's ice hockey, specifically in Division 3, because that's where I worked the last 2 years at Castleton. So here we go. Let's start first with our terminology that I used. I tried to define and search for 4 different items. So I was looking at zone entries and exits and entry and exit denials. And I broke those down up into different granular ideas. So looking at controlled state for entries and exits was either controlled or uncontrolled. Controlled exits were carries, and passes. The uncontrolled were chips, dumps, and clears, which primarily occur on the penalty kill. For entries, it was carries, small area passes, so passes that were within half of the neutral zone, between the red line and the offensive blue line. Stretch passes, which were any pass that was longer than that, and then chips and dumps were uncontrolled. Also looking at the game state and shot attempted. When it came to entry and exit denials, the same type of entries and exits were analyzed, but in terms of controlled state, I also looked at whether it was a controlled denial, so the player was able to take control of the puck and turn it the other direction, a forced uncontrolled denial, so the defender was able to force through their actions the opposition to dump or chip the puck in an uncontrolled state, or an uncontrolled puck recovery, which was they went and were able to pick off a dump in or a chip in or someone and so forth. The data source in particular, the women's team, to give you a sense, went 11, 13, and 2. They had a -4 goal differential. They had the 14th worst power play in the country, but the 6th best penalty kill. The men's team went 7 and 19. They had a -56 goal differential. They had the 2nd worst goals against in the country, and had the 13th most PIMs per game in the country. So breaking it down a little bit, entry defense results for the women's team. The primary concern would be the number of controlled entries that they were facing. Although they do seem rather adept at defending uncontrolled entries, given the number of forced uncontrolled and controlled denials that occurred on dumps and chips. Conversely, the men's team saw a relatively larger amount of uncontrolled and passing entries, but were significantly less successful at either of them. Preventing zone exits, the women's team saw a lot of variation. They were much better at preventing the uncontrolled exits than they were the controlled. The passing was what really caused them problems. The men's team, on the other hand, faced much fewer relative uncontrolled zone exits, so teams were passing and carrying the puck on a higher rate to chipping and dumping, and they were simply not very adept at stopping any of them. We break down the actual entries. The women's team saw a great deal of success in carrying the puck, struggled on dump and chase hockey, and puck retrievals. The men's team saw a much higher variance in those opportunities. They struggled much more when it came to passing the puck into the zone than the women's team, and they were slightly more successful at retrieving dump and chip in uncontrolled entries. When exiting the zone, the women's team, we advised that they not dump the puck out very often because it was not an effective means of retaining possession. But they were relatively successful passing the puck out of the zone and very good at exiting the zone while carrying the puck. The men's team attempted fewer dump outs, but many more chip outs. So a dump out being, it got out past the red line in the neutral zone, whereas the chip would be to chip around a defender at the blue line. They attempted more of those and were not very successful at either. They had a higher rate of success with passing exits than the women's team did, but carrying, they had fewer attempts. So we break it down and compare. In terms of entering the zone success rates, you see the women's team in blue, the men's team in red, because women's hockey is clearly the superior option, as I always say. The women's team was better at stretch passes and carrying. The men's team was much more successful at executing small area passes, but also more successful at dumping and retrieving and chipping and retrieving. Although the chip success rate between the two was relatively similar. At defending, at the rate of attempting, the women attempted to enter the zone with the puck carrying it almost 50% of the time. The men were only at about 30. However, the men attempted passing much more often. Look at the success rates of zone exits. The women were better at the uncontrolled zone exits than the men were. But, that a lot of that comes from chipping the puck out and winning that race to the puck. We look at the rate of attempt. The men attempted to carry the puck out of the zone much more often, but the women attempted to chip and dump much more frequently, and they were more successful at it. The rate of passing exits was relatively similar in terms of style of play. So what does this all tell us? It's a whole bunch of numbers I just threw at you. It sounds like a bunch of gibberish, right? So to me, it appears that the men's team appeared to favor more dump and chase stylistically, but the women were much more successful at executing that. So they were winning the races and winning the physical battle to regain the puck when they were choosing to do that on a more successful rate. Both teams struggled heavily against the rush, but the women were much more consistent in their attempts to deny controlled exits than the men's team, because the men's team preferred to make plays in the neutral zone rather than at the blue lines. The men's team also struggled to stretch the ice and counterattack quickly. They had a sub 50% success rate on stretch pass entries, so they were not taking advantage of opposition changes, odd man rushes, so on and so forth, as they should. Both teams leaned heavily on a few players for entry and exit attempts. That had a significant impact on the data. However, the women's team was more rounded when it came to defending entries and exits. Forwards were contributing to entry and exit denials at a much higher rate than the men were. The men were relying much more on their defensemen to make a play at the blue line or in the neutral zone, and the forwards were struggling to get back and make a play. That, to me, indicates a systems difference. The women's team appears to be more adept at having a high third forward and back-checking properly than the men. What does this tell us? To be honest, not a ton. It's a relatively small data set. Both teams, I analyzed 5 games apiece and broke down the data that way, simply because of available time and resources. In order to gain a better understanding of the potential information, I need to have a much wider base to work from. Additionally, it's biased towards two teams that did not end the season with winning records and had negative goal differentials. So that's going to have an impact on the ability to analyze as well. I did my best to choose games somewhat randomly, but also making sure that games were not blowouts when I analyzed them. So there were a mix of wins and losses, and there weren't any extreme outliers on either direction. It's a good starting point for research. I wouldn't make wide sweeping generalizations about the state of the game, but it's a good idea base for someone to take and further analyze their own team or their own work. It's a bit of heavy lifting, but I enjoyed it. I appreciate Carly and Mike and Alyssa giving me the time to kind of spew this information at you. I'm excited to see where it goes, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Spencer. It was a pleasure to hear about. I'm always interested in systems play and like especially the contrast between the men's and women's game. I feel like I'm been on this soapbox with you and others about how we need to compare the two a little more just to see like what those systemic differences are. First off, congratulations on your new coaching position. I see you've got the hat and the shirt all
Yes.
decked out already. Nice,
Thank
nice.
you. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited for you too. I just so many people in this conference have just come such a long way from when we first were doing this. So exciting. Anyway, on your presentation, my first question was all that stuff was hand tracked, right?
Yes. Yeah, I used our video system through Instat to watch the actual games, but I was manually hand tracking every single entry and exit so that I would get the correct amount of data points and data breakout.
How large did that data set end up being?
I was getting about 250 to 300 data points per game. So each data set, the men and the women had over 1,000 individual data points. It just varied game to game on once I broke it down between the 4 categories that I was tracking for individual data sets. It got down to about 300 to 400 individual per. And that's where I said I think I'd like to have, given the time and resources, to be able to have at least double that to really be able to make proper inferences on systems and styles.
Yeah, well, I really commend you for that. It takes a lot to hand track stuff like that, and a lot of dedication and an attention span that I no longer have these days. So congratulations on making it through that. One of the other questions I am always curious about is like with systems play and like player choices, right? It's a chicken and the egg kind of situation with like coaching versus success, right? Because the coach will be like, absolutely do not skate this puck up. You do not have the strength to get through 2 defenders, right? So was there like, I guess like an observation effect on that, where because I know you were like working with players and probably were discovering this stuff throughout the season or something like that. Was so like can you talk a little bit about that, about like how your coaches were coaching these players to do certain to move the puck in a certain way versus like how successful they were?
Yeah, I think both the men's and women's team gave a fairly decent amount of free reign to our players. Systems-wise, it wasn't like we're doing X, Y, and Z on every breakout, and these are your options, that kind of thing. I think special teams had more of an impact on that because you're running specific breakouts on the power play. You're trying to just clear the puck properly on the kill. But it has a lot to do with us encouraging our players to lean into their strengths. So there were a couple of players on both rosters that were really good at moving the puck properly out of the zone and doing it with conviction and possession. So allowing them that freedom to do that really just bore itself out in the consistency of the data. And that's why I said both teams relied heavily on a couple of players, so it does skew the data a little bit, but overall it's a good sense.
Yeah, that was kind of my next question, but you kind of answered that there about like how that success of each exit and entry type really, I mean, it really is dependent on player and line. And then you get into that whole question of like, you know, like is the team being successful on it is like this one player, but like is the team really the player and is the line anyway? I would be very curious, just as like a note, to see how those results kind of bear out when they're weighted by line time. Right? Because like you said, there is like a couple of players who are very good at certain things. So, but
yeah,
I did the ice time.
Well, no, I did, and I did.
Oh, okay.
When working with the team, individual players and such, I was scaling properly by ice time given those games. But again, a 5-game sample is hard to kind of judge that even on that level. But looking for trends and such, it was helpful for the individual coaching staffs to kind of work through that.
Yeah. We have a question from Jeremy, kind of related back to the whole personnel coaching thing. Do the zone entries depend, and I assume also the zone exits depend on personnel or the opposing team more? So like, is that choice made contingent on who's on the ice for your team or the opposing team? And is there a way to factor that in?
I don't know if there's a way to factor that specifically. I think you need a wider data set that's not focused on a single team to kind of get that proper distribution. So you're always going to have that problem when you're researching a single team as your basis. I think that based on the data that I collected, no, it's not dependent on team, because I did my best to kind of pick neutral differences between the teams playing. But it absolutely makes a difference when there's a talent disparity, or you're playing an exceptionally physical team or an exceptionally fast team. I know the women's team, we tried to play the same no matter what, to stick with what we're good at and just pound that into the ground as best as possible, and the results are the results. The men's team struggled a bit more with that, but they also play in a very heavy conference, so they're naturally more predisposed to the physicality, and as borne out by the penalty minutes issue, there were some discipline problems that impacted that.
Do you have similar plans to do this for St. Michael's now that you've like stepped up the league, I guess?
I think that's a conversation I have to have with my head coach. I quite literally moved today. My first day was technically Monday last week, and my first day in person is tomorrow. So we have a whole litany of things to get down to brass tacks on and figure out what the plans are. But of course, any part of what I bring as a coach is my data analysis and applying that to different things on the ice. So whatever I can do to help the program grow, that's what I'm here for.
As one of the first women's hockey coaches to come out of the women's hockey analytics space, what are you going to be most focused on analytics wise in the first year for yourself rather than like for the team?
For myself, I think it's more about finding different ways to grow, right? It's a team. I'm excited about the opportunity. It's a growth year. We don't shy away from the fact that the team struggled last year, and looking for different ways that we can grow internally. Finding different milestones internally that don't necessarily bear out on the score sheet. Having individualized growth patterns and plans.
Mm-hmm.
Finding ways to develop and set individual internal goals for the team, the group, individual players. That's kind of where I would come at it from, without delving too much into what those plans are and such.
Right,
I think that's something that I was very open about through the interview process, and I'm comfortable sharing that. That, you know, there are ways that we can adjust things and change things and you know, shift the focus, so to speak, and see where it takes us. But that's part of the journey, and that's part of the excitement I have for being here in this position is we get to try stuff. You know?
That's exciting. Yeah. We actually have one more question from the chat. Christian Bergeron asks, is there any data collection for the women's team about utilizing east/west lateral drop passes to take advantage of checking rules to have more momentum on zone entries?
No, but now you have a bug in my ear, and
I
it's
know,
gonna
right?
bother me
It's
the
such an
rest of the
interesting
day.
question.
Yeah, it's such an interesting idea, and I think it really depends too, because the NCAA the last few years has been slowly scaling down their the level of enforcement with physicality in the women's game. They're starting to try to allow a little bit more and let a little bit more go. You still have the officials that will call the "I'm bigger than you" checking penalty, which is a point of contention and annoyance for every coach. But I think that it's going to be about finding a way to meet in the middle on that. I think that now has me thinking about different ways to attack, and nobody can steal them because they're definitely not in the public anymore. But no, that's an interesting way to approach it. And I can't say that I have any data on it, but it'd be something you could use this kind of project to kind of delve deeper into.
Yeah, well, I look forward to seeing St. Michael's try that out this year.
I don't know if we'll try that out now that it's out in public domain, but we'll have some different looks to throw at people, you know.
Sounds good.
But anytime anyone from the community wants to come out to a game, absolutely reach out. Part of this position is trying to grow the game. You know, we have a really good setup here in Vermont. You know, we play a very wide-ranging schedule, and you know, it's nice to see some friendly faces once in a while at the rink, and kind of expose people to new ideas. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out if anyone has any more questions or they think of something random, you know, 3 days from now about this presentation. I've locked my social media for obvious reasons now, but you know, my
if they send them to me,
or I have my contact information is available on the on the St. Mike's roster page. So
you have special email now.
I'm official now. I don't know how I managed to find this, but I'm excited, and I can't wait to hear from people and see where this goes.
Yeah, me too. I'll see you at a game. Thank you so much, Spencer. And that was a great project, and thank you for the answers.
Hello, everybody. I'm Fritz Sanger.
I'm Jan Pettis.
And I'm Christina Vu.
I'm here today to talk to you about our project, Killer Defense, evaluating individual defensive contributions on the penalty kill. At the start of our project, we set out to examine what leads to success on a hockey power play. Through the project, we narrowed our focus specifically to power play passes, and ultimately, the goal of our project was to determine what factors determine pass completion, and from there to see if we could pinpoint which defensive players were best at causing pass disruptions. Our data came from the 2022 and 2024 Big Data Cup and was provided by Stathletes. The data contained play-by-play event data for 29 women's international hockey games and tracking data covering all of the power plays for 6 games. The tracking data in its raw form had some data cleaning issues. For the sake of time, for our project, we used clean data from Alone Harrell, Robin Ritchie, and Phil Shreve's 2022 Big Data Cup submission. We decided a good way to view different passes in context was through classification. This plot shows all passes following a puck recovery from our data. The reason we are showing only passes following a puck recovery is simply to make the visual easier, as there are far too many total passes in the dataset to distinguish anything. In the plot, the defensive zone is on the left and offensive zone is on the right, and each arrow represents a pass. We used k-means clustering and ran the algorithm with 10 clusters. We clustered the passes using the event data from all the games, not just during the power plays. In the plot, the defensive zone is on the left and offensive zone is on the right, just as with the previous one. And in our EDA, we saw that most power play passes occur in the offensive zone. So we focused most specifically on the pass clusters generated in the offensive zone, which were D to D passes, D to F passes, cross ice passes, offensive regroup passes, and possession passes. We wanted to build a model to predict the probability of pass success and to analyze what affects pass success during power plays. We created and used the following feature variables in our model. The pass pattern from our cluster analysis, such as D to D or cross-ice passes. We calculated continuous variables, such as the distance from the closest defender to the passing lane and the distance from the passer to the receiver. And we looked at the number of defenders within 5.5 feet of the passing lane and created binary variables for whether a defender was close to the passer or the receiver.
And with these 6 variables, we test different models, including game and random forest, because we need 3 like-based model to handle non-relationship of the data. We chose XGBoost over random forest since we were interested in how each feature impact pass success, but all models have their pros and cons. We evaluate the model using 5-fold cross-validation. And to further evaluate the model performance, we look at the sharp value. You can see from this waterfall plot, only 3 out of 6 variables are significant, with pass pattern have the highest impact. We noted that all these 3 variables have positive effect on pass success. Next, we broke down how each variable impact the model. While pass pattern have the highest impact, not all types have the same impact. For example, the cross-site passes are more impactful than the D2P passes. This makes sense since cross-site passes are longer and normally riskier to make. We also noticed that shorter passes, represented by the purple color, tend to have lower sharp value, meaning longer passes are more impactful for success. And after studying and optimizing the model, we wanted to interpret the result by introducing new terms. Expected pass completion probability is a model prediction on pass success. We define defender contribution as different in probability with and without the closer defender. Then we calculate defender contribution above average to compare a defender contribution to other.
As Christina said, using the model, we were able to use to create both offensive and defensive metrics. This first graph shows a team offensive metric. So on the x-axis, we have the average expected pass completion probability of each team. And on the y-axis, we have their pass completion over expected. So, for example, Finland, who's all the way to the left, but is above the x-axis, actually overperformed their expected pass completion by about 3%, and they attempted the riskiest passes, whereas the US attempted probably the least risky passes according to the model because they had the highest expected pass completion probability, but they barely overperformed their expected pass completion by about 1.5%. This next one is an individual defensive metric graph. and it actually ranks, well, it shows the top 5 and bottom 5 defenders by their contribution above average. The way this is interpreted is, so Michelle Karvinen, who is our top ranked defender in this metric, and has a value of 0.265 in contribution above average. This means that when Michelle Karvinen was the closest defender to the passing lane, their impact on that pass being attempted and the completion probability of that pass was about 26.5% more than the average defender, which speaks to how close Michelle Karvinen gets to the passing lane or to the defender or receiver whenever she is the closest defender to the passing lane. And to kind of verify with the eye test our graph, we actually saw that 4 out of the bottom 5 defenders in this metric are forwards, and we thought that tracked. And next, we wanted to see how these metrics actually show up in an actual play, and we were able to animate a couple of goals using the player tracking data. One of them being this goal that Finland scored against Switzerland in the bronze medal game. Before we show the animation, here's the actual play. So we see a D2D pass, then a D2F pass. Finland loses possession, then they recover the puck by the wall, bring it up, and it results in a goal with a pretty risky, crowded pass at the end. The way that looks in our animation is same player movement. We're actually able to plot the passes and attach the expected pass completion probability. So obviously this D2D pass that was not crowded at all has a high probability of being completed. This second pass, the D2F pass, has a pretty low probability according to our model. And even though it was completed, we saw they lost possession shortly afterwards, which this animation shows. And the pink dot's the place where they recover the puck, bring it up, and this assist here, this pass, we can see, if you remember from the play, it's pretty crowded in and around the Switzerland's goal. So this pass actually only had a 10.2% chance of being completed according to our model. Obviously, it paid off. And as we saw, Finland had a tendency to attempt these risky passes. So what we can conclude from this analysis that we ran is that the expected pass completion probability is not necessarily a measure of how good a specific player or a team is at passing the puck, but rather it speaks to their decision making and their aggressiveness, their risk tolerance when attempting passes during a power play. The defensive contribution, as I said earlier, speaks to how close a defender actually gets and how much pressure they apply when they are the closest defender. So this also actually depends on their teammates and how much of a load or responsibility any single player carries within their team on the defensive end. Because even if a player is the closest to the passing lane during an attempted pass, if there is another player that is nearby to the passing lane, their impact when removed from the ice would not actually show up as much in our model, which is actually one of the limitations of our analysis, besides the small sample size, is that we're only looking at these attempted passes, which are oftentimes either the most valuable or the least risky passes, because offensive teams want to maintain possession during the power play. And it's actually one of our ideas for future work is to account for passes prevented by other defenders on the ice and maybe weigh these contributions not just by passes that they're blocking or discouraging, but also by weighing these contributions by the value of that pass that they are defending, whether that be the expected goals of a shot taken from the spot where the pass target or potential pass target would be, or the expected pass added value of a pass being completed to that zone of the rink. Thank you for your time.
Hi, everyone. We are here with our 3 CMU sports analytics campers. For those of you who are not aware of what this program is, CMU, the CMU sports, or not sports department, statistics department has a specific summer program for college sophomores and juniors to come in and learn about sports analytics from Ron Yurko and a bunch of other people in the field. And Christina and Ian and what was your name?
Fritz.
Fritz. Are all from that program, and we are very lucky to have them here, and very lucky that they chose to do a women's hockey project, because it is hard to get younger people into this sub niche of hockey analytics. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you guys for being willing to present. My first question is, how did you guys come up with the idea for this project? I saw that you had obviously touched on Alon and Robin's work from the Big Data Cup on, you know, like their whole like expected pass project and stuff like that. But walk me through the evolution of kind of start of the idea to like execution of this project.
So originally Sam Ventura, our project advisor, you know, came to us, he came to the camp and said he was interested in leading a group who would look at power play analysis, you know, in hockey. And that was really all of his, you know, initial, you know, interest. And from there, he said that we could kind of, you know, help guide the project ourselves. And initially we were thinking about different things with, you know, expected goals and, you know, but then I guess we found a niche. We looked through some of the previous projects in the Big Data Bowl, found a niche. Okay, less people have looked at passes. And so our first thought was, okay, look at passes in terms of, you know, expected goals and value, but we had seen some people already did that. And one thing that struck out, you know, came to us that was a pretty interesting concept was try to view things from a defensive perspective, because it's harder to generate defensive metrics in hockey. You know, like you can get, you know, takeaways and stuff, but in terms of non-event defensive metrics, it's harder to view that. And so we thought it would be an interesting project to view, you know, pass completion percentage, but also from a defensive perspective.
Good stuff. Yeah, that's great. My one technical question before we get to some broader questions. Why did you choose k-means instead of another clustering algorithm?
So when we look at what variable we can look at to like build a model, we want to see the pattern of the pass, not like usual way to like define the pass. We want to see when you put on the eye, so the graph we show for the clustering is after we mirror the coordinates, so like the cluster would not depends on the location, like it would not like depend on which zone it is, and like just like from one zone to another zone, but we want to look at the pattern, like how long is it? Is it longer shot for a shot? Is it just a setup one, or like it's around the corner to the goal? So we want to use k-mean to like find the pattern and like find the cluster with the same pass pattern, so we can put it in a variable in our model.
Right. Yeah, you guys did a good job explaining that in the presentation, but I guess my question was more, why did you use k-means itself instead of like a hierarchical clustering algorithm or like dbScan or a Gaussian mixture model? If you guys don't have an answer and you're like, k-means is what we know and what we're going with, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think that we thought that k-means would be effective enough for the task and pretty simple, and so we went with that.
Okay, cool. Now that you've done this project, you have the results. Is there anything that you would do differently going back, whether that's like reframing a question or like doing the data collection differently or like pulling out different results? Anything?
I think there are quite a few things that we would probably change just from the approach that we took, because we did jump around from idea to idea before settling on this. But we do think, I think that we stand by the kind of broad scope of the concept that we took at the beginning, because we didn't really know what exactly we wanted to focus on. Like we said, once we actually started kind of digging into the expected pass completion probability and the player specific impacts, I think that's where really the most important analysis is going to take place. So we wanted to keep it broad and maybe in the future be open to shifting ideas on like what specific part of the play we want to drill down on.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to figure out where to narrow down to before you do the project itself. So I think you guys did a good job on. I assume you guys only had a couple of weeks to get this done. It's usually how it goes. Yeah. Well, I think you guys did a great job for the limited time frame. One of my other questions is, given the results of this project, and this was obviously a very technical project that you guys did, like the player tracking data, very hard to work with. And, it's hard to turn that into a single distilled sentence that to convey that to like a stakeholder, right? So I'm going to ask you to do that right now, though. What would be the biggest takeaway for a coach or GM, would you say, for this project? Like one sentence.
In my opinion, it probably boils down to strategy during power play. What we showed in the first graph, the team offensive metric of expected pass completion probability and completion over expected, I think that's probably the most important analysis or insight that we found. It's just finding an optimal strategy in balancing risks with passes, but also still maintaining possession, I think.
Right. Yeah. Actually, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I agree with that. I think that it's very interesting to see like the different risk, the risk level that teams are comfortable with taking. And I think so I think that's our biggest takeaway from the project. But the other biggest takeaway is that we think that the approach that we had is also a very viable approach for further analysis, like we said in our future work, to actually create some very interesting defensive ratings for players.
Right. Christina, do you have anything to add?
Well, they already touched everything I want to say, but I guess it's really because we use this one for only one tournament with women data, and everything it can like expand to other tournament and like have ranking player as another defensive metric to that.
Right. Okay, cool. We have a question from the chat. Christian Bergeron asks, do you think this model could be scaled for hypothetical uses for coaching means to show players more optimal passing options for higher completion and less dangerous lanes?
I think it is definitely practical to use. Like we said, though, it's still needing a couple extra steps to get there. So I think we would have to go through, or whoever wants to use this would have to go through the actual weighing of the value of passes, either through the expected goals of a shot from the place where it's completed to, or the possession value of a pass being completed in those zones. But I think once that next step is kind of added to the project, I think that's definitely very practical. At least in film breakdown, I think that's where it's the most obvious implementation of it.
And I also think that beyond that, if in a coaching room showing players passes that didn't occur, but if you freeze frame player has the puck, the pass that they made, displaying the percentage of that and the expected value of that, and then showing, well, you also had this other pass with this slightly higher percentage or slightly higher expected value that could have been a better pass. And so, using it on passes that didn't happen could also be interesting from that coaching perspective to show players what they might have done better.
Right. Love it. Speaking of this, like, strategy changing effect on like coaching and stuff, you touched on the fact that Canada seems to have a pretty high risk, high reward type of strategy. Would you recommend to any of these teams to change their strategy of how they're executing passes?
I think we saw varying levels of success. I think US had the most conservative passes. They took home the silver medal. Canada, I think, was actually somewhere in the midpoint of risk tolerance, but they overperformed their expected completion percentage by the largest margin, and they won the gold medal. Finland took the riskiest passes, still overperformed, but they won the bronze medal. So I think it probably comes down to matchups and sort of like whether you're favorited or the underdog. So Canada came in probably being the favorite or a favorite, and they showed that they probably were deservedly the favorites. They overperformed the expected completion percentage, but they didn't really have to take those risks that maybe Finland did have to get as far as they did. So I think it's more so on a case-by-case basis. I do that the non-favorited teams, so those outside of US and Canada, could probably lean into the variance of higher risk passes to try to hopefully make it further than they're expected to.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff.
I also think that because we were looking at power plays, I might argue that the US should have been a little bit more risky with what they're doing, because it's not like a normal possession where if you make a risky pass, there's a potential dangerous breakaway, or I think that's more controlled in power plays because of how nested the defense is around the net. It's harder for the other team to get a breakaway, and so I think it's probably smarter to be a little bit more aggressive than the US was. And we see that Finland and Canada, who won the gold and bronze medals, were quite aggressive in their power plays. So I think that the US might have wanted to increase aggressiveness.
So I just want to add one small result. We didn't include an offensive plot because we didn't have enough time. But basically, it's a plot to show what player complete like the most expected pass compared to the model, and like in the top of the model, most of them are like from Canada, and like they even have like higher percentage and even higher number of pass made. So I think that's one of the reasons they were able to make more risky pass, because they even have more chance, and like more most of them perform well according to the model compared to other players.
Right. No, I love that takeaway. Yeah, it's something to keep in mind. Thank you so much to you three for presenting your work. I assume you're going to be presenting at CMSAC in November? Okay, lovely. I will probably be there, so I look forward to meeting you all. And if you guys want to catch them in person, also come to CMSAC, which is, like I said, early November, maybe? I don't know. Go look at their website. I wish you luck on that, and good luck with the rest of your work in your semesters. And thank you so much for being here.
Hello, everyone. It's Julie Tasheri from the Jocks and Jills podcast, and my camera is tilting, but that feels authentic to the chaotic vibes of our podcast. Not authentic to our podcast is the fact that I'm sitting here in my little corner by myself right now. We don't have Tessa Bonham today. Obviously, it's a lot less cool talking to just me. I have way less gold medals and cool hockey experiences. But we got to go to Montreal this weekend with CCM, and we were hanging out with lots of the ladies. We got to make some fun content for season 2 of the Jocks and Jills podcast, which we're really excited about. I'm like shamelessly plugging this hat that we're really excited about. We're going to have merch in season 2 of the Jocks and Jills podcast. So I'm going to speak on both of our behalfs. Tessa, there was big storms in Montreal and Toronto last night. If you're in either one of those cities, or maybe the whole East Coast, saw a lot of rain and wind and torrential downpour. Also, why doesn't it rain normally anymore? Do you guys find that when it rains, it's just like a torrential downpour now in the whole city that you're in floods? Anyways, that's just maybe a Toronto apocalypse that's happening. But Tessa is stuck in Montreal right now, trying to get back on a standby flight to Toronto. So we both still wanted to thank you guys for wanting to hear from us. Thank you guys for engaging with our content this year and being down for the way that we covered women's hockey and kind of this, we wanted to be authentic, and we wanted to be casual, and we wanted to be conversational, and we wanted to make sure we were covering it like hockey, and not just, I don't know, handing out flowers all the time, even though all the women in the WHL deserve flowers 24/7. We really wanted to create a platform where women in the league and players in the league could be themselves and tell their stories. They all have such interesting stories. Like, that's been the most fun and rewarding part about doing the Jocks and Jills podcast. Aside from the community that we've been able to create, there's already such an amazing community in women's hockey, but really does feel like there's this extended family that we have going with the Jocks and Jills podcast with Tessa's Jill, that obviously is right here and has become this ongoing joke on the show that everybody likes to rip on. And I love the fact that we have like inside jokes on the Jocks and Jills podcast. In saying all this, that's like the more casual side of our coverage, where we hope to like be able to let the players show their personalities and tell us a little bit about their stories, and then talk hockey to us as well, obviously. And we love to see a little bit more of a casual side of the girls. We also, in the first part of our podcast, like to break things down, like get into the nitty gritty of hockey and the technicalities and who's thriving and who's not. And that obviously requires not a lot of analytical research, because I'm not gonna claim that Tessa and I are like big major hockey analytics experts, but we do rely on a lot of hockey analytics experts to get us good information, and there are so many of those resources now, which is insane. Like, I've always loved women's hockey. I've only worked in hockey for like 6 years now. I entered the industry right out of school and was working a little bit in hockey, not working, but more volunteering in hockey before that. But I remember when I started and I was doing play-by-play for PWHPA games at the Mattamy Athletic Center in Toronto. I remember this so vividly. Trying to look up statistics on all the girls was so frustrating. Even the best players in the world, it was hard to find information on, good numbers on, good context for those numbers as well. And it's been so incredible to watch, even the last 5-6 years, the way that, different resources have popped up. And actually, have I remembered to thank Mike for inviting us to do this? Thank you so much, Mike. And the reason I'm thanking you at this kind of random time in my little video rant that I'm doing in the corner of my apartment right now is because Mike's resources of statistics and analytics and data that otherwise would have been lost have been so invaluable to me, and I know a lot of other broadcasters and hockey media people over the years, because a lot of that information would have been lost if it hadn't been kept track of from the CWHL. And even PWHPA numbers are hard to access, and like the earlier days of the PHF, like these numbers are so important and they matter so much to women's hockey, and they literally would have all gone up in smoke if it wasn't for quite a few key people in hockey. But Mike specifically is someone who I look to a lot, and I use his resources a lot. And then in the last couple years, with the creation of the PWHL and women's hockey really getting its moment in the spotlight, we have these beautiful models from Dom Lucian and other people that have just made covering this sport so much easier and so much better. It's made us be able to be better at our jobs. And I'm not just talking about Jocks and Jills right now. I'm talking about like our TSN Women's World Championship coverage. I'm talking about our TSN PWHL coverage. It's been a real thrill to watch this area thrive. It's a real thrill to see this conference grow every year. I remember seeing posts about it last year, and we were really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you guys. We love collaborating with other people in women's hockey media. We love like the Easy Does It podcast. We love Noxie and Cax. Like, we love collaborating with other podcasts. The Too Many Men show, we were really excited to collaborate with on this too. So we love the collaboration in the women's hockey space. We love seeing the rise in how much better data has gotten in the last 5 or so years, and we're excited to see where it goes next in the second year of the PWHL. So Tessa and I are like pretty open books. You guys can email us if you have any questions for us, or if you want to get in contact or work with us in any way. Like, our email is jocksandjills@gmail.com. We're always open to questions and like concerns and commentary and even just discourse. Like we were looking forward to being live with you guys today, and I don't know, I just sat here and ranted for like 7 minutes, but we were looking forward to having more of a back and forth with you guys and kind of hearing what you guys think of the state of hockey media and how analytics are woven into that. So we'd love to hear from you if you want to shoot us an email there. And thank you guys so much for having us and just for even having interest in hearing us yap at all. We appreciate you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for making it to the end of Whkyhac. We are very happy that you are still here, and hopefully you got to see some really good talks today.
Would like to like just once again, we do this every year, but like thank everyone so much for like the time they dedicate into like putting these presentations together, and you know, the like I feel like every year we have 1,000 schedule changes from our initial iteration. Everyone just rolls with the punches so well.
Much appreciated.
And like it's truly, as much as like everyone thanks us for putting it on, like without these presentations this conference doesn't exist. So
yeah.
None of us gave a presentation this year, which I think is a record. So
huge win. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you everyone else for carrying the load in regards to the actual content.
Yeah, and we're all so proud of you for, if it was your first conference here with us or your fourth, we're very proud of everyone who has stuck here with us, because it's hard to follow women's hockey. It's hard to follow women's hockey analytics, and the people who make up this community are gems and such hard workers, and I am grateful for every single one of you. And I would love to give you a gold star if I ever saw you in person.
So much of my takeaway from every time we do Whkyhac is how inclusive and excited this community is, how much people are so excited, like reading in the chat how jazzed people are to see, like, that's so cool, that's such a great, like, it's funny, like, I don't know what excites me more, returning faces or new faces, because the fact that we have this community that just is so stubborn and persists, but also has these open arms to people. And, you know, like Julia just said, for Jocks and Jills, like it's kind of summed it up pretty well, was the spirit of collaboration, the spirit of being open and looking at each other as a way to, we all just kind of want the same things, right? And that's what I think is what's really makes Whkyhac worth all the headaches and chaos every year, is we come away from it feeling like, yeah, we know a couple more people doing really cool stuff, and the people who are still doing the cool stuff after all these years they have a place to share their work, and that means everything to us. So thank you all, the bottom of our hearts. It means everything. I do want to take a quick moment to give a shout out to Victory Press, which had to shut down. We've had participation from folks at VP in the past. I just want to make a quick note that this space is a little bit poorer without VP, but it was shut down for all the right reasons, and we support that and can't thank that crew enough. Can't thank everyone who helped make this year happen enough, and especially want to thank Dee, who we brought into our little cabal of craziness, and Dee really helped keep us on track and a lot more organized than we would otherwise be, because Dee also got a front row seat to how, so we all planned pretty well, and then everything just kind of, the wings fall or there's a giant hole in the boat. It's just the way things go. But really could
if you got an email from Whkyhac this year, it's because of Dee.
It's because of Dee. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. We hope to be next year. But this year was very hard to pull off. So if any of you have ideas for next year, or feedback or comments, as always, we would love to hear them. Love to hear love to hear like how much we're awesome too.
Yeah.
That helps to keep us going.
I'm great with positive reinforcement.
Just tell us we're good. We just want to hear we're good.
Tell us we did a good job.
Yeah.
But no, it's always a joy. Reach out to presenters that you liked, and do tell them. I know as someone who's presented at conferences before, particularly online conferences where you don't get like the immediate like feedback. I like hoard the positive feedback that comes through after. Like,
I screenshot that stuff.
Yeah, I should
really
have.
makes a big difference.
But send them feedback. Let them know that you love.
Send them a nice note. Yeah, send them a nice note and be like, "Wow, thank you so much."
And if you have any questions, like 99.99999% of the time, everyone is going to be willing to help you, and the 0.1% they're not. It's probably because they're overwhelmed with something.
We don't have any social stuff unplanned for this year, unfortunately. It also is an obscene time of night for Alyssa. So.
Oh no, it's morning. I have to go to work.
Oh, it's morning. Great.
I literally have to go shower and go to work.
Right. Okay. So, have fun with the rest of your day, everyone. It was wonderful seeing you all.
Farewell. Bye.
Thank you for Whkyhac 20.